Hello there everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to walk you through how a green witch studies, documents, and profiles herbs. Lately I have been neck deep in profiling herbs, and this has been true for about the last year. If you're curious, I have notes about this on my Patreon, where I also share my herbal profiles monthly. But as I've been working on these profiles, and now that it's summer and I am surrounded by so many plants, I figured that it was about time I gave a refresher on how I study, document, and profile magical herbs. When I was first beginning practicing and studying herbs, I was very lost on what I should be documenting, what I should be keeping track of, or even what I should be looking for. So for those of you on a similar journey down the herbal path, hopefully this video will be of use to you. It'll give you a very comprehensive starting point to begin documenting herbs yourself, what to look for, what to note, what to think about. Of course, feel free to expand upon this if there are other elements that you're interested in studying, or you don't have to include everything that I do. This is what I include in my journals based on my craft. But if you practice differently from me, feel free to exclude information or include more. All of us follow a very unique path. It is meant to represent ourselves. So this is not set in stone. This is just a reflection of my own personal craft. So I'm very excited to share this with you, but before we dive in too deep, this video is sponsored, so let's talk a little bit more about that first. I used to really struggle with my focus when working or completing day-to-day tasks. That is, until I found Aura. Over the last few years that I've used Aura, it has served as a powerful tool for helping me to manage this issue. It's unlike any other app I've used, and is something I turn to frequently to ground and bring myself a sense of calm. And for the last year, I've been using the app to help me maintain focus while I work on writing my next book. Aura is an award-winning mindfulness and sleep app used by over 8 million people. It's an all-in-one app for your mental wellness and has everything you need for mental health in one place, including meditation, sleep tracks, hypnosis, therapy, CBT, life coaching, thousands of meditations, breathwork, and more. It also features expert content from therapists and coaches worldwide, meaning you'll have no need to download extra apps. Aura isn't one size fits all like most other apps. It's personalized just for you. It uses AI to learn what works best for you and gives you an experience that is tailored to your unique needs. It's like having a personal wellness coach in your pocket. Through Aura, I have curated a playlist of all my favorite tracks. Personally, I favor their soundscapes. They bring me so much peace and help me to maintain focus. So the playlist I want to share with you is a collection of my favorite nature soundscapes that I use to ground and focus throughout the day. With 30 tracks, you can challenge yourself to sit down to one each day of the month to immerse yourself in the different sounds of nature. It brings me so much peace to listen, and I hope it does the same for you. Plus, the setup is so easy. From the very beginning, Aura starts learning your needs and content preferences so you can enjoy a tailored selection from track 1. Aura truly is the only app that has helped me better my focus and deepen my mindfulness. Through the years I've worked with it, it's been an absolute game changer for me, and I know it will be for you too. That's why I encourage you to join me on this 30-day challenge using my own Aura playlist equipped with the tracks I know you'll love. So if this sounds interesting to you, get started for completely free on Aura's website using my special link in the description. The first 500 people to use my link will get a free trial plus an exclusive 25% off. It's gonna go fast, so you might as well sign up now while you're thinking about it. Thank you so much to Aura for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. Alrighty, welcome back. Let's dive in. Through my studies, my documentation, and ultimately the herbal profiles that come through, I look for 4 main categories of information. First, I am interested in the herbal identification. Then I dive into the medicinal properties and uses, if there are any, if not the toxicity. Then I dive into the magical attributes and close out with notes on the cultivation of the specific plant. Each of these sections have quite a bit of nuance and house a lot of information, so buckle in, we've got a lot to talk about. First, let's talk about herbal identification. While herbal identification is perhaps the simplest section in this entire study of the herb, it is the most important. This is how we confirm what type of herb we are using, the specifics of said herb, and just ensure that we are working with what we mean to. So first and foremost in this section, I note the common name, the one that I will be calling it by. Then after this, I like to note the scientific name or the botanical name. Sometimes there are more than one species that is used. In this case, I list multiple scientific names. Other times, every species under a particular genus is useful. Again, rose is a perfect example of this. And in that case, I will give it the abbreviation that says all of them are useful. So here we have botanical name or names. Then naturally, it is the botanical family or the scientific family that I note. I find this to be something that is more interesting to me. I like to see the commonalities between families. After this, I like to note additional common names that a plant may go by. There are quite a few plants out there that have many different common names, almost all of them do, and it is important to note them for research purposes. There are times where you'll come across something like the bachelor button, which also goes by cornflower. Those are vastly different names, but their folklore ties back to the same herb. And so knowing that when you come across those names, they mean the same plant is very useful. So always important to note as many common names as you can. This is a section that tends to grow as I get to know an herb better. I'm always coming across new common names in different languages or cultures. And then finally, perhaps one of the most essential pieces of information in the identification section of an herbal profile, the botanical description. Here I detail ad nauseum the description of the plant, how it looks in its varying growing stages, how to properly identify it using patterns in its leaves or stems or flowers. It is a very deeply detailed section of my notes and a very important part of ensuring that you're working with the proper herb and know it well. This is a step I would not skip because this is such an important part of getting to know each herb. And truly, there is no such thing as too much information when it comes to a botanical description. So to ensure that we've got this section covered, when you're writing a section on herbal identification, the very first step to studying and documenting an herb is the herbal identification. And make sure you get down the common name, the botanical family, additional common names, and a botanical description. Now let's chat about the medicinal properties. As an herbalist, medicinal properties are a very important part of my herbal studies. I'm far better acquainted with medicinal herbs than poisonous herbs, and so this is an essential piece of my herbal profiles and my studies. If you are not someone who practices herbal medicine, this is not a very necessary area of herbal documentation, but it can be interesting to note. I would say, however, that it is essential to note toxicity if you are one who works with poisonous herbs. So if you are not interested in talking about medicinal herbs, it's important to still make a note if it is going to have the potential to harm you, which in some cases I do work with herbs such as hellebore or foxglove, which are very deadly poisonous herbs and ones that I would never turn to in a medicinal sense. So I would note in this instance that they have toxicity instead of diving into medicinal properties. But for an herb like chamomile, lavender, skullcap, basil, so on, all of these wonderful herbs, I would detail their medicinal uses. In this section, I like to begin by noting the parts of the plant that are edible or used in medicine. Something that I added recently, which I really adore, is how they taste. This has been really helpful when I'm experimenting with tea blends or just general edible preparations. I also document their actions and energetics before diving into their specific indications. So something like chamomile, it's an anti-anxiety and a sleep herb. Same goes for lavender. Lavender is great for relieving headaches, or peppermint is one of my favorites for soothing an upset stomach. These are specific indications that I would note in this section. Then after this, it is important to document medicinal preparations that the herbs are used in, and perhaps the different parts of the herb that are used in these places. For example, some herbs are not very beneficial medicinally when made into a tea or an infusion, but they are very valuable when made into a tincture. It depends on what parts of them are useful in a medicinal sense and how best to extract those parts from an herb. For example, if you're using marshmallow root to help with a sore throat, you would want to make an infusion with that. A tincture would not help you at all in that situation. It wouldn't be able to extract that mucilage that really helps soothe that sore throat. So a very important section to document and kind of have some notes on. Then it is essential to talk about ratios and dosages. This kind of goes hand in hand with the preparations. Some herbs can be toxic when taken at too great of quantities. Some herbs also are better when ratioed out pretty smallly, or maybe they can be equal parts to other plants. So an important thing to note and study up on. Then I like to kind of dive back into those specific indications and have a more descriptive discussion of their medicinal uses, diving into perhaps why marshmallow root is good for a sore throat, or what kind of headaches are best treated by lavender, and is chamomile a really good sleep herb, or is it just kind of a mildly calming herb that will kind of help you relax and enter sleep. This is the area where I really study and understand the herbs best. It is another very extensive part of my notes, and it takes time to write. And this section is often growing as new studies come out, or I discover new uses for each herb that I work with. Then it is essential to me to close out my medicinal section on an herb with precautions and contraindications. There are plenty of herbs that are not helpful for people who are suffering from certain medical conditions or are experiencing different phases of their life. If somebody is pregnant or breastfeeding, there are herbs that are not safe for that, but are otherwise fine. There are herbs that interact poorly with medications. And so in this area, I like to note all of those important things to factor in when working with an herb medicinally. And of course, if the herb is not medicinal and rather toxic or poisonous, all of this is scrapped and I just write about its toxicity. Or if it's an herb that can become toxic in greater quantities, I do note that again here in the precautions and contraindications. So to recap the medicinal preparations, if you are to add this section into your own notes, make sure to add the parts used, the taste, actions and energetics, specific indications, medicinal preparations, ratio and dosage, medicinal uses, as well as precautions and contraindications. Alrighty, it is now time to dive into the magical attributes. This is perhaps my favorite section of studying herbs. I love looking into the magic of herbs, the folklore of them, and enjoying getting to know them deeply in this energetic sense. I love working with herbs medicinally, but getting to know their spirit is a whole nother level, and I feel like it allows me to work with them in a deeper and more personal way. When it comes to magical profiles, this is something I've talked about before, and this is probably something you are somewhat familiar with. And if you follow me on Patreon, you have seen a great many of my magical profiles shared there. And there are quite a few in my book as well. So when it comes to magical profiles, this is kind of sectioned out into a few different areas. First, the herb's energetic correspondences, so the gender, element, and planetary ties of an herb. This lets me know the base energy of an herb, how its magic works, and how I should expect it to engage with spells and other herbs. Then I have notes on its properties and ties. This is stuff like healing, protection, purification, calm, prosperity, and so on. And then, of course, I close the area on its magical ties and attributes with a section on folklore and magical uses. Here, I deep dive into those magical properties and ties and any of the folklore that speaks to that. I go into the stories and tales. I explain how each herb ties to protection or to calm. Say it is a protective herb, but it is really mainly protective when you are traveling. This is the section that I would note all of that. So this is another fairly extensive part of my notes, and it's also one of my absolute favorite sections. I find myself returning just to reread through the folklore of herbs frequently. So to recap that section, and this is something that I would recommend for every witch who is practicing with herbs, in your magical section, take note of the gender, element, and planetary ties of herbs, the properties and ties, along with the folklore and magical uses of herbs. Alrighty, now let's talk about the final section of my herbal studies and documentation, cultivation. The cultivation of herbs is only important if you are interested in growing them or are just kind of curious about them. I like to document the cultivation of herbs regardless of whether or not I can grow them. I just find it fascinating, and I think it is a useful part of understanding their magic as well as their medicine. This section is pretty straightforward. It is what you find in most profiles on herbs, as it's very common when you are looking at plants to understand how to grow them. I like to note where it's native to. This gives me a lot of notes on its cultural ties as well. I know its growing zone, the soil that it likes, the different methods of propagation. This is a very important one if you are growing plants because every herb is different and unique. I also like to have notes on its growing information, what it likes at different stages, and how it best thrives. I also include notes on insects and disease, common insects that enjoy nibbling on the plant, or diseases that commonly occur with the plant. This gives me a quick reference guide on what to look out for or preventative methods that I can take when growing the herbs, planting them beside companion plants that will protect them from certain insects, or just knowing what I need to look out for and keep an eye on potential problems that may come up while growing them. And then I also like to have notes on the proper ways to harvest each herb. Some herbs, like basil, when you harvest appropriately, will grow even larger and flourish, whereas other herbs you need to be very careful with harvesting as to not take too much of the herb, which may end up killing it. Harvesting notes are very essential, and this is something that I would recommend having notes on if you are going to be foraging or wildcrafting in any way, even if you aren't growing the herb yourself. Knowing how to properly harvest the herb, keep it healthy, and enjoy it is an essential piece. I do also like to have notes in the cultivation section on whether the species is invasive in my area or if it is endangered. This is mostly essential when it comes to foraging, the endangered part, and the invasive part is something that is very important for how I will grow it, whether it's something that is safe to grow in a container or something that I just will not bring into my area. I usually include this as a note at the top. So that section's very straightforward, but if you are going to include a cultivation section in your own book, I would recommend having notes on where it's native to, the zones that it grows in, the soil it prefers, different propagation methods, growing information, insects and disease, how to properly harvest, and then again, those previous notes I talked about. With that is what I look for when studying, documenting, and profiling herbs. This is specific to my own personal green witch practice. It is very extensive, and as I said before, you can include more information or less. Follow your path, do what speaks to you, and go forth with what feels right. This is what works for my magical and herbal medicine practice, but of course, do what works best for you. I hope you've gained some good information from this. I would be curious to hear from you all if there's anything that you add in your own herbal documentations, or if there was something that I mentioned that you hadn't maybe thought of. Also, if you have any questions and want me to further explain a section, feel free to ask them and I will be checking to answer them if I can. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day. If you can and would like to, I'd appreciate it if you checked out my Patreon. There I share art, herbal profiles, book recommendations, and monthly workshops. You'll find the herbal profiles on the magical sections, just like what I shared here. I do them monthly, and I have a ton of fun getting to share them with you. My workshops are also a place where I deep dive into a lot of information like this is a topic that's agreed upon by you all and a ton of fun every month. Patreon is really what keeps things running over here, so if you want to help support this channel, go ahead and check it out. I also have another channel where I share more day-to-day life, more magic, herbalism, all of those good things. And of course, I wrote a book. It's all about herbal magic and will take the beginner to the intermediate. It has a large section on herbal profiles and deep dives into the magic of herbs quite a bit. So if any of that sounds good to you, all of this will be linked in my description down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I can't wait to see you again soon.